The Galactic Empire declared war on Earth. Humanity smiled like it was long overdue. Part 1, The Declaration. The message came at 3:47 in the morning, Luna Standard Time. I was on my second cup of coffee, half awake at my monitoring desk inside the Joint Terran Intelligence Hub, watching the usual river of alien trade signals scroll across my screen. Boring work. The kind that makes your eyes heavy and your mind wander. I had been doing it for 3 years without a single moment worth writing home about. Then every screen in the room went white. Not flickered. Not glitched. Went completely, silently, perfectly white. My name is Yara Solis. I am 34 years old. I hold the rank of commander in the UN Defense Liaison Corps, and in my entire career I had never seen every screen in a room go white at the same time. Not once. Then the voice came. It did not boom. It did not roar. It was calm, measured, almost polite, the way a landlord sounds right before he tells you to leave the property. The translation software rendered it into English before my brain had time to decide how to feel about it. People of the planet designated Earth. You are hereby formally notified that the Veiltheri Galactic Empire has classified your world as a Class 4 occupied hazard. Effective immediately, military pacification operations are authorized. Resistance is discouraged. Cooperation will be rewarded with a structured integration into the Empire. You have 72 hours to respond with terms of voluntary surrender. Then the screens went back to normal. Every single alert in the hub fired at once. I stood up slowly. Around me, 12 other analysts were doing the same thing, standing, staring at their screens, mouths open. Nobody spoke for about 4 seconds. Then Lieutenant Owen Garrett, who sat 3 desks to my left and was known for saying exactly the wrong thing at exactly the wrong moment, broke the silence. "Well," he said. "That's new." I reached for my communicator and called Director Priya Nair. She picked up on the first ring, which told me she was already awake. Probably had been for a while. "You heard it," I said. "Everyone heard it," she said. "It went out on every frequency simultaneously. Radio, optical, quantum relay. They translated it into 4,000 languages, Yara. 4,000. They've been watching us for a long time." That was the detail that stayed with me. Not the declaration itself. Not the 72-hour deadline. The 4,000 languages. That took preparation. That took surveillance. That took years, maybe decades, of quietly studying us while we had no idea anyone was listening. I pulled up the global news feeds on my secondary screen. Every channel, every country, every network was already running the broadcast. The Veiltheri had not sent it privately to our governments. They had broadcast it to the entire planet at once, publicly, the way you would announce something to a crowd you expected to panic. They expected panic. I remember very clearly what I saw instead. The feeds from the street cameras in London showed people stopped on sidewalks, looking at their phones, and talking to each other. In Lagos, a market that should have been erupting in chaos was instead full of people gathered in small groups, gesturing, arguing, nodding. In Seoul, a man on a bridge was watching the sky with his hands in his pockets, looking more curious than afraid. Our governments did not panic either. I found out later that the contingency files had been activated within 90 seconds of the broadcast. Files marked first contact, hostile. Files that had been sitting in classified servers for decades, updated every few years, waiting. The military attaches were already on secure calls. The defense ministers were already in their situation rooms. The emergency councils were already convening. The world had not been caught off guard. That was the part the Veiltheri had not planned for. They had done this 61 times before us. 61 civilizations, each one discovered, declared a hazard, given a deadline, and absorbed into the empire. The fastest surrender had come in 11 hours. The slowest had taken 18 days, and that one had been a species with natural armor plating and a chemical weapon the empire had not expected. Even they had surrendered in the end. The Veiltheri had a process. They were very good at it. It was almost administrative, the way some organizations are good at paperwork. They arrived, they declared, they waited, they absorbed. Clean. Efficient. Practiced. I remember exactly what I felt when the war declaration came through. Not fear. Something older, quieter than fear. The feeling you get when a bully finally throws the first punch, and every year of training you did in secret suddenly has a purpose. It was almost a relief. The kind of relief that sits very still in your chest and does not make any noise. I went back to my desk and started pulling the Veiltheri fleet data we had compiled from intercepted signals. 200 warships, according to our best estimates. Moving at a pace that would bring their advanced elements to the edge of our solar system in roughly 6 days. Their main fleet would follow a week behind. Owen appeared at my shoulder, holding his coffee mug. "Are we going to be okay?" he asked. I looked at the fleet data. I thought about the contingency files. I thought about the 4,000 languages, and the 61 civilizations, and the way the director had picked up her communicator on the first ring because she had already been awake. "We have been getting ready for this for a long time," I said. He blinked. "Ready how?" I almost told him. Then I remembered that Owen Garrett did not have clearance for what I was about to say. So I just picked up my coffee instead. "Go make sure all the long-range sensor arrays are on full recording mode," I said. "We are going to want every piece of data we can get." He nodded and walked away. I turned back to my screen, and the fleet data, and the 72-hour countdown that had appeared in the corner of every government display on the planet. 72 hours. I thought about the Veiltheri admiral sitting in his command ship at the edge of our solar system, looking at our small, blue, apparently fragile planet, and feeling confident. Feeling certain. Feeling the comfortable certainty of someone who has done this 61 times and never once had to change the plan. I thought about what he was going to find out. And I smiled. Not because any of this was easy. Not because nobody was going to get hurt. People were going to get hurt. I knew that. I had known it for years, the same way a surgeon knows before an operation that there will be blood. You accept it, you prepare for it, you do not let it stop you. I smiled because we had been waiting for this for a very long time. And we were ready. Part 2, what we did not tell them. The transport to the dark side of the moon took 40 minutes. Nobody spoke during the ride. There were 6 of us in the shuttle, me, Director Nair, 2 senior engineers whose names I had never been given, and 2 uniformed officers from a division whose badge I did not recognize. The shuttle was military grade, unmarked, and had no windows. When the hatch opened, I stepped into a corridor I had never seen before in 3 years of working on Luna. It was enormous. I had expected a bunker. Concrete walls, low ceilings, the kind of place that is built to survive rather than impress. What I walked into instead was a facility so large that the far wall was barely visible. The ceiling was 40 meters above us, filled with lighting rigs and cable systems. The floor was polished and clean and busy with people moving quickly between stations. Director Nair walked beside me without looking at my face. She already knew what expression I was wearing. "We call it the quiet room," she said. "It has been operational for 19 years. You were not told about it because you did not need to know. You need to know now." A man was waiting for us at the first checkpoint. He was in his 60s, with gray at his temples and the kind of calm that comes not from personality but from long practice. He introduced himself as Dr. Mehmet Aris, Chief of Strategic Development. He shook my hand once, briefly, and then started walking. "I will show you the 3 things," he said. We followed him past rows of engineering stations, each one staffed by people who did not look up as we passed. They were focused. Intensely, quietly focused, the way people are when they have been working on something important for a very long time and do not need to perform urgency for visitors. The first thing was a long bank of display screens showing a schematic I did not immediately understand. Rows of cylindrical objects, arranged in clusters, each one connected to a targeting system that spanned pages of technical notation. Relativistic kinetic impactors, Dr. Aris said. Dense metallic slugs, each one roughly the size of a vehicle. Launched from rail platforms hidden inside asteroid clusters in the outer belt. At the velocities we can achieve, they carry more destructive energy per impact than any beam weapon we have tested. They produce almost no energy signature before launch. Their approach is nearly invisible to standard fleet sensors. I stared at the schematic. "How many platforms?" I asked. "Enough," he said. He moved on before I could ask for a number. The second thing was a room full of drone units. Not the small survey drones used in civilian space operations. These were different, long, fast, angular machines built from materials I had not seen before. They were stacked in racks from floor to ceiling, and there were hundreds of them visible from where I stood, with corridors leading to more storage beyond. Each unit is networked to a central AI battle management system, Dr. Aris said. They do not require individual piloting. The network makes tactical decisions in response to fleet movements faster than any human crew could manage. In a full deployment scenario, they function as a single coordinated system. The Empire's combat models were built around species that fight with crude ships and predictable formations. They have never encountered an autonomous swarm at this scale. I stood very still. How long have you been building these? I asked. The first generation was completed 14 years ago, he said. This is the fourth generation. The third thing was not a weapon. It was a wall-sized map of the solar system. But not the solar system I knew from public charts. This one had additional markers, 14 of them, scattered in positions that I would never have looked at twice. Cloud layers of gas giants. The gravitational shadow of a moon. A debris field that public records listed as natural. Off-world installations, he said. Prepositioned. Resupplied through automated freight runs logged as waste disposal and mineral survey operations. The Empire's intelligence assets watched our public military activity and reported back what they found. They did not look at the places nobody officially goes. I turned to Director Nair. How long has all of this been planned? I asked. She looked at me for a moment. The first serious planning document was written in 2031, she said. The year we decoded the first confirmed signal from an alien civilization and determined that they were not broadcasting. They were mapping. Mapping. Not saying hello. Mapping, the way a traveler maps a road before deciding whether to walk it or take it by force. We made a decision, she continued. Every species we could study through intercepted signals had the same pattern. The ones that announced their strength were tested early, pushed hard, forced to spend everything defending themselves. The ones that appeared weak were left alone until they were not useful anymore. We wanted a third option. Appear weak, I said. But be ready. Appear ordinary, she corrected. Fractured nations. Political arguments. Space programs that look civilian. A military that looks conventional. Nothing that says, here is something that has been preparing for 60 years. I thought about the Veiltheri Admiral again. The one sitting in his command ship with his confidence and his administrative certainty and his 61 successful operations. I thought about what it would feel like to be him in about 6 days. Dr. Aris had one more thing to show us. Not a weapon and not a map. A file. He pulled it up on a small screen at a quiet workstation in the corner of the facility, and he let me read it at my own pace. It was a record. Not our record. Theirs. 61 entries. Each one a species, a planet, a declaration, a timeline, and an outcome. Short summaries, clinically written, in Veiltheri notation that our translation software had been working on for 11 years. Species 17 had tried diplomacy. They had offered resources, trade, technology sharing. The Empire had accepted the gifts, waited for the defensive systems to be lowered in goodwill, and then proceeded with pacification. Species 32 had fought back with energy weapons. The Empire had been briefly surprised but had adapted within a week and proceeded. Species 48 had attempted to negotiate time. They asked for 30 days to consider the terms. The Empire granted them 12, then proceeded anyway. I read all 61. Not one of them had been ready. I closed the file and sat quietly for a moment. Outside the facility, buried under rock and vacuum and the quiet dark of the moon's far side, every single thing we had spent 60 years building was waiting. 14 installations. Thousands of drone units. Rail platforms hidden in asteroid fields. A battle management system faster than human thought. And we had not told anyone. Not out of arrogance. Not out of pride. Out of the same careful logic that keeps a surgeon calm before a hard operation, you do not announce what you are going to do. You simply prepare, and then you do it. Owen had asked me on the day of the declaration whether we were going to be okay. I had told him we had been getting ready for a long time. That was the most honest thing I had said to anyone in 3 years. When the Veiltheri Advance Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of our solar system 4 days later, they sent the standard follow-up transmission. A reminder of the deadline. A list of proposed surrender terms. An assurance that species who cooperated were treated fairly. Our response was prepared in advance. It was brief. It was polite. It asked them, once, to leave. The Empire's admiral did not even pause before refusing. I was in the communications room when the refusal came through. Commander Leon Graves, our senior contact officer, looked at me across the room after the channel closed. He was a quiet man, 40 years old, calm in the way that Dr. Eris was calm, practiced, not natural. "That is that, then," he said. "That is that," I agreed. I wrote one sentence in my personal log that night, before the first engagement began. We only ever ask once. Part 3, The Battle of the Threshold. I heard the first engagement before I saw it. Not sound, there is no sound in space. What I heard was the alert tone that filled the operations room at the quiet room facility, a low, steady pulse that meant the automated systems had gone active. I was at my station, reviewing targeting data, when the tone started. Everyone in the room straightened up at exactly the same moment. Leon was already on the main comm channel. "Veiltheri Advance Fleet has entered the Jupiter corridor," he said. 42 vessels. Formation consistent with their standard orbital blockade approach. They are heading for Jupiter's upper atmosphere positioning, which matches the intimidation tactic from their Species 19 and 34 operations. Dr. Eris stood behind the central display, hands clasped, watching the fleet markers move. "Release the platforms," he said. That was it. No speech. No dramatic pause. Just 4 words in a quiet room. For the past 2 years, the Veiltheri's own sensors had identified a cluster of objects in the Jupiter belt as inactive mining stations. Decommissioned, according to the signal signatures they emitted. Old. Dead. Not worth examining. They were not mining stations. The platforms activated without any warning signature. Rail launch systems do not fire like conventional weapons. There is no energy bloom, no heat trace, no targeting emission. There is simply a mass, and then the mass is moving at a speed that most sensor systems are not calibrated to detect until impact is already occurring. The first salvo hit within 11 seconds of launch. I watched the fleet markers on the display. One moment there were 42. Then there were 39. Then 34. The Veiltheri ships began breaking formation. You could see it in the data, the way their positions on the display started scattering outward instead of holding the tight blockade pattern. They were good, I will give them that. Their pilots were fast. Their evasive protocols were sophisticated, clearly designed by people who had studied combat seriously. Under any other circumstances, against any opponent they had previously encountered, those protocols would probably have worked. But they had never encountered invisible projectiles fired from multiple angles simultaneously. 11 minutes after the platforms activated, 28 Veiltheri ships were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 14 had scattered beyond the Jupiter corridor and gone to full engine burn in the direction of their main fleet. The alert tone stopped. The room was quiet for about 3 seconds. Then Leon said, "They are transmitting to their command ship. Heavy encrypted traffic." I looked at the casualty data on my screen. 28 ships. Crews of approximately 40 each, according to our intelligence estimates. Roughly 1,100 Veiltheri personnel, gone in 11 minutes. I noted the number. I did not look away from it. I had a habit, which I had developed during my training years, of making myself fully understand bad numbers. Not just read them, but actually sit with them. 1,100 was a large number. Those were beings with families and histories and reasons they had joined their fleet. I did not forget that. But I also did not forget what they had come here to do. What they had done 61 times before. Dr. Eris walked to my station and looked at my screen. "Casualties on our side," he said quietly. It was not a question. I pulled up the secondary report. A crewed relay station designated RT-7, positioned at the edge of the engagement zone for communications coordination, had been hit by debris from a destroyed Veiltheri ship. The station's hull had failed. 14 personnel. All gone. I read their names silently from the manifest. Helen Porter. Crew Coordinator, 41 years old. Nathan Cross. Communications Engineer, 30 years old. Celia Ward. Data Analyst, 26 years old. 7 others whose names I will not put down here because their families asked for privacy, and I respect that. But I read every one. I said each one out loud to myself, alone, later that night. Not in a ritual way. Not out of ceremony. Because names matter. Numbers are easy to look at and then look away from. Names are not. Dr. Eris nodded when I showed him the report. We note them, he said. We note them, I repeated. The Veiltheri main fleet received the battle data from their surviving ships within the hour. 6 hours of complete silence followed. No transmissions. No contact. Just silence. Our intelligence team ran analysis on that silence. There was a pattern to how the Empire communicated during operations: steady traffic, regular updates, the bureaucratic rhythm of an organization used to things going as planned. The silence meant they were doing something they did not have a template for. They were surprised. Not just by the losses. By the nature of the losses. They had expected energy weapons, projectile systems of a type they had catalogued, perhaps an aggressive but manageable conventional defense. They had not expected invisible rail platforms disguised as abandoned infrastructure firing at velocities their shields were not designed to absorb. Their shields were built for beams and plasma bursts, directed energy weapons that move at the speed of light and give the shield system time to distribute the load. A dense metallic slug arriving at a significant fraction of that speed hits differently. It does not give the shield time to think. I wrote this observation in my report and sent it to Dr. Eris. He sent back 2 words. They noticed. Meaning the Veiltheri had already worked out the same thing and were adapting. Which was expected. Intelligent opponents adapt. What came next confirmed it. Leon brought me the intercepted transmission data 48 hours after the Jupiter engagement. The Empire was recalling the surviving advanced ships and calling in their full main fleet. Not just the 200 ships already in transit, additional reinforcements had been dispatched from the nearest Imperial staging point. The new total estimate was 340 vessels. They are not running, Leon said. No, I agreed. They never run. They just send more. I thought about the 61 files I had read in Dr. Eris's facility. Species 32 had surprised the Empire too, briefly. The Empire had simply adjusted its approach and continued. 340 ships represented an overwhelming response by any conventional measure. But we were not a conventional opponent. I was reassigned 6 days later. Transfer orders to the ISV Ardent, a Terran strike cruiser operating from the installation hidden in Saturn's upper cloud layer. My role would be coordinating the AI battlenet targeting from aboard a crewed ship, which meant I would be at the front of the next engagement rather than watching it on a screen. I packed in 20 minutes. Soldiers do not take much. On my last night at the Quiet Room facility, I sat in my bunk with the lights off, looking at the small porthole that looked out on nothing, just lunar rock, just dark. I said 14 names out loud. Helen. Nathan. Celia. And 11 more. Then I closed my eyes, and I thought about what was coming, and I let myself feel afraid for exactly 10 minutes, because feeling afraid is not weakness, it is honesty, and I have always believed that an honest soldier is a better soldier than a brave one. After 10 minutes, I stopped. I stood up, packed my kit bag, and went to sleep. Part 4, We Are Not the Prey. The Ardent smelled like recycled air and machine oil, which is the smell of every military ship I have ever been on, and which I have come to associate with the particular calm that comes just before something very difficult. Captain George Flynn met me at the airlock. He was a tall man, 50 years old, with the kind of face that does not give much away. He shook my hand, pointed me toward my station, and said, "We go active in 4 hours. Get settled." That was the entirety of my welcome briefing. I settled in. My station was in the Ardent's command center, a room about the size of a large apartment, curved along one wall with display screens and workstations occupied by 11 crew members who were all, without exception, deeply focused on what they were doing. I sat down, plugged in my authorization codes, and pulled up the BattleNet interface. The AI system had a designation, Project Caleb, and it was not what most people picture when they imagine an artificial intelligence running a war. It did not speak dramatically. It did not announce its decisions. It updated targeting data in real time, shifted drone deployment in response to fleet movements, and flagged priority targets with a simple numerical priority score. Clean. Quiet. Relentlessly efficient. I had been trained to work with it. My job was to translate its recommendations into human-readable tactical summaries for Captain Flynn and to flag any situation where the AI's decision modeling might benefit from a human judgment call. In practice, this happened less often than you might think. The main Veiltheri fleet arrived at the outer solar system boundary 40 hours after my transfer. 340 vessels. On the display in front of me, they looked like a swarm of bright points moving in careful, controlled formation. I had read enough of their tactical history to know what that formation meant. They were approaching in layered columns, designed to provide mutual shield coverage and overlapping fire arcs. It was a smart formation. Difficult to flank, difficult to concentrate against, able to absorb damage on the outer layers while the inner core continued advancing. They had used this formation successfully in over 30 documented engagements. Captain Flynn stood at the center of the command room, hands behind his back, looking at the same display. "Caleb," he said. 340 contacts confirmed, the system responded. Its voice was mild, pleasant, entirely unremarkable. Formation analysis complete. Recommend initiating Phase 1 in 7 minutes, 40 seconds. Confirmed, Flynn said. I had been briefed on Phase 1. It was the part one had not been told about during my time at the quiet room, not because it was too secret, but because at the time I had not yet been assigned to a ship. The mass driver platforms I had seen on the schematic were the obvious first layer. But they were not the only layer. The mining operations in the outer solar system were, in most cases, exactly what they appeared to be. Real operations, real output, real economic activity. The gantry structures used to move processed ore from collection points to transport vessels were not exactly what they appeared to be. At full acceleration, a processed ore container traveling along a delivery gantry is just cargo. At modified acceleration, using the same electromagnetic systems but pushing past cargo tolerances, that container becomes something else entirely. Caleb released 412 of them simultaneously. The Veiltheri formation encountered a field of fast-moving dense objects from a direction their threat assessment sensors had classified as empty industrial infrastructure. Their formation columns attempted to break and reform. The outer layer ships began taking impacts before the inner core could respond. I watched the display. I kept my breathing even. 61 contacts destroyed or disabled, Caleb reported, with the same mild voice it used for everything. Formation integrity reduced by 31%. Recommend releasing drone swarm in 4 minutes. Flynn nodded at me. I authorized the release. The drone swarm came out of the Saturn installation like a single exhaled breath, thousands of units, each one moving independently but all of them acting as a coordinated system, filling the space between our position and the damaged Veiltheri formation with a presence that their combat sensors had never been designed to track or prioritize. A crewed ship is easy to target. It has a mass, a heat signature, an engine bloom. It moves in ways that can be predicted because it has to protect its crew from G-forces and hull stress. A drone does not have a crew. It can accelerate in any direction without warning. It can absorb damage without anyone dying inside it. It can be replaced. And when several thousand of them are moving simultaneously, each one making independent microdecisions based on Caleb's network, the targeting problem becomes something very close to unsolvable. The Veiltheri adapted fast. I will always say that about them, they were good. They shifted their fire patterns, they regrouped the undamaged inner ships, they tried to establish a new forward perimeter. For about 20 minutes, it looked like they might manage it. Then the second rail platform salvo hit. I gripped the edge of my station. Not in fear. In the way you grip something when you are absorbing the scale of what you are watching. The Veiltheri fleet had 197 functional vessels when the second salvo ended. Captain Flynn said nothing for a moment. Then he turned to me. "They are hailing us," said the communications officer, a young woman named Carol Lane, who had not looked up from her board in 3 hours. "Put it through," Flynn said. The voice that came through was not the automated broadcast we had heard at the declaration. It was a real voice, older, careful, with a weight behind it that automated messages do not carry. "This is Admiral Thesek of the Veiltheri Imperial Third Fleet. I am requesting direct communication with a human command authority." Flynn looked at me. I was surprised. This was not in any of the Empire's documented protocols. They did not request dialogue mid-engagement. They did not recognize the possibility of needing to. I opened the channel. "Admiral Thesek," I said. This is Commander Yara Solis, Terran Defense Liaison. I am here. A pause. Commander Solis, he said. I want to understand what I am facing. I have reviewed every record in our archives of first contact with a new species. None of them look like this. No, I said. They would not. What are you? He asked. I thought about that for a moment. Not what to say. I knew what to say. I thought about whether it was the right time to say it. It was. We are the 62nd, I said. Silence. In that silence I could feel him working through it, the 61 entries in their own records, each one a species that had declared, been absorbed, been documented. 61 times the process had worked. 61 times it had been clean and efficient and final. And then he understood. You knew, he said. You knew what we had done. We have known for a long time, I said. We read the signals. We studied the pattern. We made a decision. Another pause. Longer this time. What decision? He asked. I thought about 60 years of quiet preparation. About 14 hidden installations. About 19 years of drone development. About or containers on gantries and rail platforms disguised as abandoned mining equipment and an AI system that made targeting decisions faster than any biological mind. I thought about Helen Porter and Nathan Cross and Celia Ward and 11 more names. We decided we would be the one that ends it, I said. Not just for us. For everyone who comes after us. The line was quiet for a long moment. I need time to consider, Thesek said. Take it, I said. We are not going anywhere. I closed the channel and looked at the display. 197 Veiltheri vessels holding position. 300,000 kilometers away, waiting. Carol Lane looked up from her board for the first time. Did that just work? She said. Not yet, I said. But it might. That night I wrote in my log for the first time in 4 days. I usually write every day, it keeps my thinking organized, and organized thinking is the only kind I trust in situations like this one. I wrote about Thesek's question. What are you? I had given him the factual answer. But there was a longer answer, the one I thought about alone in my bunk, with the engines of the Ardent running quietly beneath me and the stars outside the porthole as indifferent as always. We are a species that learned early that the universe does not give things to those who simply want them. It gives things to those who prepare for them. We argued with each other for thousands of years about almost everything, the right way to live, the right way to govern, the right way to treat each other, the right way to look at the sky. We still argue. Probably always will. But when something from outside came to tell us we had no choice in the matter, we discovered something about ourselves that none of our arguments had ever quite resolved. We are, when it comes down to it, remarkably difficult to stop. Part 5, the smile explained. The ceasefire request came on a Tuesday. I know it was Tuesday because I had just finished writing a letter home, to my sister Ada and her daughter Lucy, who was 8 years old and had been sending me drawings of spaceships since the war started. The latest one showed a human ship that was, in Lucy's assessment, very large and covered in what appeared to be flags. I had it tucked in my jacket pocket. Still do, actually. The request came through formal channels, which was itself significant. Not a battlefield hail like Thesek's first contact. A formal, encrypted, correctly formatted diplomatic request sent to the UN Emergency Council and copied to the Terran Defense Command, the kind of message you send when you want a record of having sent it correctly. Admiral Thesek had drafted it himself, according to our intelligence analysis. Not the Empire's diplomatic bureau. Not a committee. Him, personally. I read the translation 3 times. It was careful language. Not an admission of defeat, not a request for mercy. A recognition, as Thesek phrased it, that the current engagement has produced outcomes inconsistent with Imperial operational projections, and that the Empire wished to explore whether a cessation of hostilities might serve the interests of both parties. Director Nair called me the same morning. You are on the negotiating team, she said. I am a defense liaison, I said. You are the person Thesek spoke to mid-battle, she said. He knows your voice. That matters. Pack for 2 weeks. The talks are happening aboard a neutral-class vessel in the outer belt. I packed in 20 minutes. Old habit. The neutral vessel was a Kiriti trade ship, the Kiriti being one of the few species in our region of the galaxy that the Empire had absorbed through treaty rather than force, and who had subsequently developed a reputation as reliable third-party hosts for difficult conversations. Their ship was clean, quiet, and smelled of something faintly sweet that I never identified. Thesek was already there when we arrived. He was not what I had built in my head during our calm conversation. I had imagined someone cold, precise, the administrative face of an efficient empire. He was older than I expected, gray at the edges of his outer cranial ridges, with eyes that had seen 61 of these operations and apparently had been doing a great deal of thinking about them lately. He stood when our delegation entered the room. I did not know if that was a Veiltheri custom or a personal choice. It felt like a personal choice. The talks ran for 6 days. I will not pretend they were smooth. They were not. There were 3 sessions that ended badly, with raised voices and delegations retreating to separate rooms. There was one night when the entire negotiation nearly collapsed over a single clause in a proposed framework document, and our lead negotiator, a patient and extremely experienced diplomat named Arthur Hollis, spent 4 hours rebuilding the conversation from nothing. Arthur Hollis is one of the most remarkable people I have ever met. He is 67 years old, originally from Bristol, and he has the quality of making every person he talks to feel that their position is completely reasonable while simultaneously steering the conversation in the direction he wants it to go. Watching him work across a table from Veiltheri senior officials was something I will remember for the rest of my life. On the 3rd day, Thesek asked to speak with me privately. We sat in a small side room off the main conference hall. A Kiriti crew member brought us something warm in plain cups. Thesek held his with both hands and looked at the table for a moment before speaking. I have been an admiral for 30 years, he said. In that time, I have led 7 pacification operations. All successful. All, I believed, necessary. I said nothing. The Empire's position, he continued, is that uncontrolled species development in contested regions of space represents a risk to stability. The pacification program is framed as a safety measure. Order creation. And now? I said. He was quiet for a moment. Now I am sitting across from a species that apparently read our entire operational history from intercepted signals, spent 60 years quietly preparing a counter-strategy, fought my fleet to a standstill, and then asked me to leave before initiating combat. He paused. You asked us to leave. Once. We always ask once, I said. Why once? Because more than once becomes negotiation, I said. We were not negotiating then. We were informing. He looked at me for a long time. You could have surrendered. Your world would have been absorbed, and the process would have been, from the Empire's perspective, quite manageable. You would eventually have been integrated, given a role, been part of something larger. Someone else's something larger, I said. Yes, he admitted. 61 species made your something larger, I said. We decided we would build our own. He turned his cup slowly in his hands. The proposal your delegation has put forward. The framework. It is not what I expected from a species in your position. Our delegation had presented what Arthur Hollis had quietly been drafting for 3 years, a document he called the Open Space Accords. Not a peace treaty in the traditional sense. A framework. An independent tribunal to review military operations across the galactic region, with representation from member species. A protocol requiring first contact with pre-faster-than-light civilizations to follow a disclosure and non-interference standard. Guaranteed sovereignty for species below a defined development threshold. You won, Thesek said. You could have demanded reparations. Territory. The removal of the Imperial presence from this region entirely. You have the leverage. We know, I said. Then why? I had been thinking about how to answer that question for 6 days. Not because I did not know the answer, but because I wanted to say it in a way that was honest rather than impressive. When we were studying your history, I said slowly, the thing that struck us most was not the 61 operations. It was what came after each one. The species that were absorbed, they did not disappear. They became part of the Empire. They learned the Empire's way of solving problems. Some of them, the ones that survived and grew, eventually started doing the same thing to smaller species nearby. Because that was the model they had been given. Thesek did not speak. We do not want to build an empire, I said. We have read enough history, our own history, to know what empires cost. What they ask of the people inside them and the people outside them. We have tried building empires before. Smaller ones, on our own planet. Every one of them ended the same way. Then what do you want? He asked. To exist without kneeling, I said. And to make it possible for other species to do the same. He was quiet for a long time after that. The accords were signed on the 6th day of negotiations. Not by everyone in the room. 3 Veiltheri senior officials refused to sign and withdrew. But Thesek signed. And 2 of the Empire's allied species representatives, who had been observing the talks at Kiriti invitation, signed as well. The Kiriti Trade Council sent a formal note of support the following morning. It was not a complete victory. Nothing real ever is. The Empire did not dissolve, did not abandon its other operations, did not immediately transform into a cooperative partner. What it did was agree to a framework that created accountability where none had existed before. A framework that put a name and a process to something the galaxy had been missing for a very long time. A limit. Arthur Hollis shook my hand when the signing was done. He looked tired in the way that people look when they have been holding something heavy for a long time and have finally been allowed to put it down. Good work, he said. You did the hard part, I said. He shook his head. You fought the hard part. I just talked. 5 years have passed since then. I am writing this from an office I did not expect to have, the Terran Galactic Liaison Bureau, which did not exist 5 years ago and which I now help to run. My window looks out at a view that is, objectively, one of the most beautiful things a human being can see, the curve of the Earth from low orbit, blue and green and white, turning slowly in the dark. 3 species that were on the Empire's pending pacification list are now under Terran diplomatic protection. Not military protection, diplomatic. There is a difference that matters. Military protection says we will fight for you. Diplomatic protection says we will stand in front of you and make your situation visible to everyone watching. Sometimes that is enough. Sometimes it is not enough, and we fight anyway. But we have only had to do it once in 5 years, and that one was brief and expensive for the party that started it. Thesek retired from the Imperial fleet 8 months after the accords were signed. He sent me a message through the Kiriti relay system, which took 11 days to arrive. It was short. It said that he had read the full history of Earth's 60 years of preparation, which had been made public after the talks, and that he had one question. Were you ever afraid? He asked. I wrote back. My answer also took 11 days to arrive. I told him yes. Genuinely, honestly, yes. Not of the fleet. Not of the declaration or the engagement or the 340 ships on our sensors. Afraid of something quieter and more personal, the fear that we had prepared for everything except being wrong. That 60 years of careful planning might be in service of a decision that was not, in the end, the right one. We had prepared to fight. We had not prepared for the possibility that fighting would feel exactly as heavy as it did, that the 14 names from RT-7 would sit in my chest for 5 years without getting lighter, that winning would feel less like triumph and more like a door you open and then have to stand in for the rest of your life. He wrote back, eventually. His reply took 3 messages over 4 months, which is apparently how Veiltheri process things they find difficult to articulate. At the end of it, he said something that I have thought about many times since. My species would call what you did strength, he wrote. But I have come to think the word you would use is different. I think you would call it responsibility. He was right. Someone asked me in an interview last year what winning felt like. A journalist, young, very bright, who had grown up during the war and was writing about what it meant to the generation that lived through it. She asked the question carefully, clearly expecting something quotable. I thought about it for a long moment. I told her that winning felt like finally being heard. That humanity had been sending signals into the dark for centuries, not just radio signals, not just the technical kind, but the other kind. The ones written in the choices you make when you have power and choose not to use it badly. The ones written in the way you treat the people you defeat. The ones written in the documents you propose after a war, which say more about you than anything you did during it. We had been trying to say something for a very long time. We are complicated, we are dangerous, we are stubborn, and we are capable of extraordinary kindness, and we do not want to conquer anything. We just want to exist on our own terms, and we would very much prefer to extend that option to everyone else we meet along the way. The war was the universe finally stopping and listening. The accords were our answer to what it heard. I still have Lucy's drawing in my jacket pocket. She is 13 now, and she has gotten considerably better at drawing spaceships. Her latest one has the Kiriti flag on it alongside ours, and a small Veiltheri vessel in the background that she drew with great care, having done research. She sent it with a note. Aunt Yara, it said, I want to do what you do when I grow up. I wrote back and told her that what I do is mostly reading long documents in a small office and having very long conversations with people who disagree with me, and that she should absolutely do it because it is the most important kind of work there is. That was the smile. Not arrogance. Not excitement at the prospect of a fight. The smile was the face of a species that had made a very long bet, that patience and preparation and the willingness to stand firm when the moment finally came would be worth more than anything we might have spent those 60 years doing instead. We bet everything on that idea. I think, on balance, we were right. Not because we won. Winning, by itself, means very little. Because of what we did after. Because of the framework that now sits in galactic law with 11 signatories and growing. Because of the 3 species that are still making their own choices today instead of being absorbed into someone else's history. Because of the junior diplomat I mentored last year who told me her planet would not exist as it does now without the precedent set in that conference room on a Kiriti trade ship in the outer belt. Because of the door we opened. Because of the fact that we are standing in it. That was worth preparing for. That was worth every quiet year of building in the dark. That was worth every difficult conversation and every compromise that felt like a small defeat and every night spent reading the names of people who deserved to come home and did not. The Veiltheri declared war on Earth because they expected to find prey. They found something they did not have a word for in their 61 operational records. They found a species that had been waiting a very long time to make a point. And we had all the patience in the world.